Hello again. Good morning. I have to begin by apologizing. I don't know what I was thinking yesterday when I said it was Friday because it was only Thursday. Sometimes it's a scary thing living inside of my head. For whatever reason, I thought we were at the end of the week. Maybe I was wishful thinking. I don't know. But anyway, because Friday's my day off, that's probably what was working in my brain. Anyway, here we are at the end of this week, and we've been talking about the story of the prodigal son for much of this last week, and even the week before that. And as you can tell, we're probably not going to even finish it today because there's so much in here. I find this to be a well that's so deep and draws such cool and cold, refreshing waters to my soul that I just really love reading it. I love talking about it. I love meditating and thinking about it because it just communicates such gracious things about God that you begin to see the depth of God's heart for us. And that's what Jesus really wanted to really kind of communicate to us, to understand the depth of God's love for us and how much he yearns over us, and it's funny to think about that God looks at you and I right now and he finds pleasure in us. And that's why the next part of the story where the son has come to repentance is really the most poignant moment of the story, is the son coming to his senses, the awareness of his sin. But the most touching part is the emotional side of that story, is when the father sees the son and responds. In fact, after he resolves to come to his father and say what he needs to say, he says, "So he got up and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him." Now, I guess this is so beautiful because you see, the father sees him a long ways off. What does that tell me? It says his father was looking for him. His father had been searching for him. His father had this confidence that one day he would come to his senses and he would return. And so his father posted himself in a place where he could see his son. And in a way, it's saying that no matter how far we drift from God, God's eye is on every one of us. He's constantly gazing upon us, thinking about us, yearning over us, drawing us to himself. And when the father sees him, he does something that a dignified Middle Eastern man would never do. He got up and ran towards his son. In the Middle East, the idea of running that's what little boys do. That's what undignified men. That's what a servant will do in response to his master. But for the master to run towards somebody, it's completely reversed. But everything in this story is designed by Jesus to kind of, shake up people, to shock the listeners. That's really was the purpose of many of Jesus's parables. They were to shock the listeners by his story. They would strike them in ways that they hadn't ever thought about it, because he was trying to get them to think about God in a different way than they had been traditionally trained to do. And so we hear the Father is running. The idea that the Father is in hot pursuit of us, even when we're not even interested in him. And I love the fact that when he comes to his father, he looks at his son, he has compassion on him. You'd think the father's saying, "What did you do with all my money? What have you been doing? What a lifestyle. Look how filthy." We tend to do that. We tend to put people down for what they've done, and we criticize them for how they look. And we miss the whole point that it took so much strength to come back in that damaged condition and say, "I'm sorry." It's how many times people have done that, and people have just said, "Well, I don't care. You made your bed. You need to sleep in it." And yet God never does that to us. He never says, "You wasted the years that I gave you. You wasted the treasure I gave you. You wasted your health that I gave you." He just looks on us with compassion, and he rushes towards us, and he embraces us. He throws his arms around us. In fact, I love this, how he says, the son says to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." Just total humility and brokenness. And he says, "But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' And they began to celebrate, just like the angels in heaven." In other words, the Father is doing everything he can to restore the Son to the place he was in before he made this tragically horrible decision to forsake his family and forsake his faith. And yet, that's the beauty of God. That's why I love to think of God in terms of being the Redeemer. That's my favorite name for God, the Redeemer, because he takes the things that have been lost and wasted and stolen and taken from us, and he restores them to us like he did for Job 10 times more. He restores them to us. What a thankful place to be in your relationship with God, that you recognize you don't deserve any of his kindnesses, and yet you look around at what you have. And I know some of you saying, well, it's not nearly as much as this person here, or it's not nearly as much as I used to have. But then again, you don't even deserve that. Gail Irwin used to tell pastors when he taught them on the art of pastoring. It was a great line. I'll never forget. He says, if you have more than one person listening to your message, that's one more than you deserve. And I think that sometimes as pastors, we grouse that we don't have bigger audiences. And why should we have any audiences at all? I mean, we're nothing. We're just, we're mouthpieces whom God speaks through, and sometimes not all that coherently, I admit. But nonetheless, it's important to realize that anything we have is a gift of God, and we have to start with what we have and give thanks for that before we can ever expect God to add to that. He wants to begin by being thankful for what you have right now. We were lost. We were so far from him, and he rushed in. He restored us. He gave us dignity back. When he put the robe on his son, he put the signet ring of authority on his finger, sandals on his feet, which, only wealthy people wore sandals. He restored him in an amazing way. Well, we'll pick up next week because I do know that today is Friday. And so we'll pick it up next time. And looking forward to, as we continue our conversation, some really important stuff coming up here too. I think it's really important and often gets treated very lightly. So look forward to that. God bless you. Go in his good graces.